Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So the irony is when this man and I first met through a mutual connection, like the comment was, "I've met your other self, your other person that's just like you," and so then like being smart ass podcasters, we kind of cracked on it a little bit. I was like, okay, well, you're African American, you're bald. Then to come to find out as I'm doing my due diligence, he's also a Sagittarius, and I was just like, okay, this is starting to get a little bit creepy. He has a older daughter. I have an older daughter. He has a younger son. I have a younger. I'm like, this is starting to get a little bit creepier. So like, there's a lot of different commonalities, and obviously the other big thing about this individual is that he's a podcaster on the podcasting network, which is completely different than just podcasting. It's about growing podcasts, building a community of podcasts. So, with that being said, I'm going to name this individual the Boss Mayor for obvious reason, and he knows why. So, why don't you tell audience a little bit more about who you are and what would you like to talk about today, Elzie?
That was a great introduction. First of all, let me say, I love the boss mayor. I'm gonna have to. I'll give you credit the first two times, but I'm gonna have to steal that from you.
Fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough.
yeah. So a little bit about me. I'm a recovered engineer. I dumped all that information out, so don't ask me any of those questions anymore. And sort of cut my teeth in the tech field, if you will. Really started to fall in love with the way things worked in terms of organizations, people. So I got into operations and found out that I hated the company that I was working for. I didn't hate the people necessarily. It
Mhm.
was just time for me to go and do my own thing. And I had always wanted to do my own thing since I was about 14, and a situation happened that made it uncomfortable enough for me to make the jump. So I did. Started to really do some serious podcasting because there was a gap in my knowledge. I have been working side hustles for like the better part of my life, and it wasn't working. So I knew I needed to do something different. And so I started a podcast so that I could learn from business people because
Mhm.
they had things that figured out that I didn't have figured out. So started the show, really started to dig deep in learning about business and how to run a successful one. And the strategy worked. I was able to quit that day job, start my podcast and my business, and really grew that into Podcast Town, which is a platform and an agency that helps businesses grow their podcasts. So, and that brings us to today. I am, literally eat, breathe, sleep, and dream podcasting. It is my life.
I think it's phenomenal. I mean, considering that if someone was to describe you growing up, I would say you're like a small town boy growing up in a small city of like 636 people. So I want you to kind of like talk about that, like your upbringing, like how does someone go from like a small town that's less than 700 people to be in a space that's on an international scale?
Yeah, it's the funniest thing because if you would have told me back then that I would be doing what I'm doing now and meeting people from all over the world, I would say, first of all, you're crazy. We
Mhm.
don't even have any stoplights. Like we didn't have internet. Like what is that? Like my high school didn't it just boggles my mind the things that we've been able to do because of the medium of podcasting. It has shaped who I am as a human and as an entrepreneur. Um, and it really started from just a maybe even sometimes unhealthy belief in myself. I had a recruiter in high school, and we were having a conversation about my future and what I was going to do, and I had thought I was going to go to the army. I mean, that's what I thought my options were. I didn't think I was smart enough. I didn't think I could afford it. I didn't, folks like me didn't go to college. Like they just
Mhm.
didn't. And then my sister, who was in the army at the time, she would come home on leave, and she would start to plant these seeds of inspiration. She would say things like, "Man, Elsie, you're really smart. Maybe you can do this."
Mhm.
Uh, and it was masterful because especially at that age, you have to be really skillful because young kids don't want you to tell them what to do. And that oftentimes has a reverse effect. But she got really good at planting those seeds to the point to where one day I started to believe her. And I said, you know what? I think I want to go to college. And I called my recruiter up, and he comes to the school, and we start talking through things. And I said, you know what? I think I want to go to college. I think I want to give that a try. And he looked me right in the eye, and he said, "You'll never do it."
Mm.
And in that moment, it set something off in me that not only was I going to do it, but I was going to do it well. And from that point on, it just stuck. And now I literally believe I can do anything. And it's not because I'm so awesome. It's just because I know that when you have determination, when you persevere and you don't give up, you can literally do anything. So that's my mantra, man. I really just look at life, my business, as a sum total of decisions that I've made, and I can change it if I don't like it. And so that's the way I move.
So, I mean, is that something that you grew into, or is that kind of part of like, coming from like a parent, some kind of upbringing that was instilled in you besides your sister?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would say if I had to rank them in order, it would be my grandmother,
Hmm.
my mother, and my sister.
Hmm.
I could tell my grandmother, grandma, I'm gonna build a rocket ship to the moon. And she would show up to my house ready to go with her fishing pole. Like she believed in me that much. And my mom the same way. She just this unbelievable amount of belief in me. You can't help but rub off, right?
Hmm.
And so just being in that supportive environment, growing up through college and through the work world, it's like, man, if everything else goes bad, they were there in my corner. And so it was that support that really allowed me to kind of navigate that whole process.
Hmm. So, I mean, obviously, you mentioned your sister. I want to talk about like your little brother, because I mean, obviously, your little brother was a picture. I think on your Facebook page, he was saying like how proud he was of you. So, I'm trying to say, was it essentially like your grandmother and your mom and your sister that helped him to become who he is? Because he's kind of out the box as well, right? Or was it just more so him following in your footsteps and you were leading the path for him?
That's a hard question. I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I would like the hope that
Mhm.
him watching me go through and persevere has helped. But he has, I don't know, it's I don't know if you're born with it or if you develop it, but he's the same way. He has this gear, this thing inside of him that um he's going to succeed. Like there's no other option. So yeah, he's fantastic, man. I've never seen somebody who can just flow off the top of their head about anything. We used to play games with them when we were younger. We used to get different things around in the room and where we were, and he would just rap about it off the top of his head and just go. So just amazingly talented and super cool guy.
Hmm. I mean, you kind of hit that trap card, talking about music, and it was a video with you singing. And again, all of this is relative based upon what you're saying about how people believed in you and they helped you to become who you are by instilling these little thoughts in you. And it was you singing this gospel song. I think the title of it was "I Am a Believer."
Mm.
So I want to talk about, like, I mean, obviously it's been instilled in you from other people, but when did you really start believing in whatever it is that you believe that you can achieve and started doing that?
To be completely honest, it's my faith. Because it really gives me uh the wherewithal to really understand that even when it's me, it's not me.
Mm.
If that makes any sense. So I have it's almost like a big brother complex where you ever seen the little guy on the playground where he gets into an argument and he's really aggressive and talking big stuff because he knows that his big brother is standing behind him.
Mhm.
That's kind of the sense with me. It's like I am able to show up the way I show up because I know that God has my back.
Mm.
And I know that no matter what is going to work together for my good. and I'm not going to be alone. And so now I can have this bravado, this confidence, not in me, but in God who surrounds me. And so I think that's what, for me, that's where it comes from, is just understanding that and knowing that as long as I'm operating in my purpose, that that good things are going to follow me.
So I think it's definitely ironic that, I mean, one of the hashtags or the keywords that you put into your intake form was self-mastery. So I want to kind of just talk about what does that definition of that word means to you, and how are you taking that definition and relaying it to your clients?
Yeah, I like that to talk about self-mastery a lot, because it's intentionally provocative, because when you talk about faith, you talk about humility, you talk about service and servant leadership. Self is one of the words that usually doesn't come up in that mix, right? But the provocative nature of it is you're conquering self so that you serve better, right? So it's impossible for me to be a great leader unless I first understand how to lead myself. I cannot teach people and show them how to be great followers unless I first learn how to follow me.
Mm.
And if I don't know what makes me tick, then I cannot master myself. And if I cannot master myself, then I cannot lead others as effective as I could if I did. Right. So the terminology in and of itself is intentionally provocative in my mind, because it's like, okay, well, is that selfish? No, it's actually selfless, because
Mm.
the better honed in I am on me, then I know my triggers. I
Mm.
know when I need to stop talking to certain people. I know when I'm in a certain mood, I don't need to be driving, right? Or when I am struggling, I need to stay away from it. So the better I get at that, and you never master it, which is the other irony in it, right? You're never a master, because just when you think you have it down, everything changes, right? I'm a different man in my 40s than I was in my 30s. And so now I have to go on that journey again. And I'll be different in my 50s than I am in my 40s. And so it's this iterative process of understanding who you are, what you are, but more importantly, understanding what you are not, right? And the better you can do that, the better leader you're going to be.
Mm. I mean, I think it's definitely phenomenal, and I'm happy that you brought up like the conversion, like the 10 years, sometimes even 5 years, sometimes it may take 20 years to kind of adapt and grow. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to you and your wife. Like, you guys just hit your 21st anniversary like a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want
Thank
to, behind the scenes now I want to bring up your wife right now, because I mean, obviously she's been on the journey with you through this transformation, and obviously you going from engineering and being electrical design, and then you saying, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. Like, I mean, obviously she supported you at some time or the other in this journey. So what does that really mean to you, that having someone of that magnitude behind you for like the past 21 years to help you become who you are?
Yeah, it means everything. I've known my wife since I was 13 years old.
Mm.
We've been married for 21 years, but we've been together for, I don't know what, 7 plus 21, 27, 28 years, right?
Mhm.
Her last name has been Flenard longer than she was her maiden name, right? So it's that type of deal where she's known me even before I had hair on my legs and a mustache, right? so so a lot of times it's her that keeps me grounded, right? It's like, dude, like, you may be an author and an entrepreneur and all these things, but I remember when you didn't have a mustache. So come back down to earth. But yeah, she's the foundation. She's the rock. When I was growing up, my mom and dad divorced, and so I didn't have that,
Mm.
that family structure. And so I knew those two things. I knew I wanted a family, and I knew I wanted to own my own business. And she's the foundation of that family. So yeah, she's everything. She's
Mm.
everything. And just having that support, no matter what, I know that I have that partner that's gonna
Mm.
go through the trenches with me. So it means everything.
So, I mean, with that being said, I guess it's safe to say that she's the chief flame officer, meaning that you're the chief flame starter, right? So I want to talk about like that nickname, which kind of plays into your book a little bit. I mean, obviously you could have went with multiple different things. You could have went with mayor. You could have went with podcast town. Like, where and why did you start with the naming convention of being a chief flame starter?
Yeah, because I think I'm always I like to describe it as strategically random.
Mhm.
So while there's always strategy, there's always thought behind things, sometimes it's just random, right? And I love that mix of things. And I think for me, leadership has been the thing in my life that has gotten me where I am. But the irony in that even is you have to be a follower first,
Mm.
even as a leader, as a chief. You have to be the person who is also is sparking those flames, right? You have to be willing to pick up a mop or a broom or whatever it is that it needs to be done in your business, that your team members need to see you. They need to be able to follow your example. And so chief is recognizing that, hey, I am a leader. That is a thing. I carry that rate, that weight. But at the same time, I'm a flame starter just like you. I follow, I learn just as much from you as you learn from me. And so a lot of the things that I do has that dichotomy in it, because I think it's important that as you lead, as you grow, that you realize that you're just like everybody else at the same time. So, but you have to understand that you have the weight, but you have to be humble and centered in knowing that you're just like everybody else at the same time.
Hmm. Hmm. So, if I was to ask you to define yourself just by using 3 to 5 words, what would those 3 to 5 words be to describe you?
Passionate storyteller
Mhm.
who loves God. I don't know if that was 3 to 5 words, but that's what I would say. Passionate storyteller who loves God.
Hmm. I mean, I definitely think, I mean, as a podcaster myself, I mean, storytelling is part of everything that we do. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing at scale or do it as well if we were not telling a story. So I want to kind of talk about that for a minute. Like, obviously, you've been an engineer, you've gotten married, you grew up in a small town, and we're unfolding the story. But what is the highlight from now until the early days is something that you can kind of pinpoint to say to trigger the fire to really start under you?
That's a tough one because there have been many moments.
Mm.
Um, I'll have to say, and I mean this, and I don't mean it to be cliche, but I really believe that starting my show changed the trajectory of my life
Mm.
because it number one, it helped me meet people that were where I wanted to go,
Mhm.
but it also taught me how to listen.
Mm.
It taught me how to learn, and it taught me how to teach.
Mm.
Right. And so those are things when you look at them at a macro level are repeatable life skills. Right. So if I repeat that and I live, listen, and teach, it doesn't matter what industry I go in, I can be successful. It doesn't matter if I'm leading a family, live, listen, teach,
Mm.
repeat. Like so it taught me that. Um, and it helped me accomplish the second half of my dream, right? I mentioned earlier there were two things I knew. I knew I wanted a family, and I knew I wanted to own a business. Podcasting is the vehicle that has allowed me to do that. And so, when I look back at my journey, that would be the thing that I think took me from going this direction to a completely different trajectory.
Mm. Mm. I think that kind of plays into like one of your hook and your taglines, and I'm just going to take a fragment of it as demand generation, right? So, and again, obviously, like you're demanding that you wanted to have this family, you're demanding that you wanted to have a business. And for me, on the outside looking in, I'm thinking that like if you're asking for it, then you should receive it. So again, you're demanding these generations of things that you're getting access to. Is that the reason behind that, or is this something else?
Somewhat. I think as you think about when you're in business, especially in the content marketing space,
Mhm.
the number one business thing that we're brokering is attention. Because if you don't have people's attention, then it doesn't matter what you sell. It doesn't matter if you're the best, the fastest, the cheapest, any of that stuff. None of that matters unless you first get attention,
Mhm.
right? And so you can't get attention unless you understand your audience. So that goes back to the listen part. So you have to listen, you have to watch, you have to understand where is the opportunity? Where do the people hang out? What do they need? What do they not need? That type of thing. So that's the listen piece. And then the teach is that's how do you serve? How do you show up to serve people with the opportunity that you've identified? And so generating demand is the process of doing that, right? So
Mhm.
the live, listen, teach, right? So you're living, you're looking at the opportunities, you're saying, oh, every time somebody goes to this bar or this event, they don't have a ride or the parking is bad. And so it's like, okay, where's the opportunity? The opportunity is they need a ride and they can't drive themselves because they've had adult beverages. So
Mhm.
why not broker people who have cars who can get them from the bar to their home, and let's call it Uber, and there's the opportunity. So I think that no matter what industry you're in, it's that same process. So so everything I do, I try to think about it that way, is identifying the opportunities and listening.
Mhm.
Because that's more so than talking. That's important. Understanding what people need, but more importantly, why they need it, and what makes them tick. And then showing up and serving them better than anybody else.
Mhm. So like just spin that, obviously like I'm a brand strategist, so I definitely love brand, and you're into brands as well. And another key frame from your terminology is podcast my brand. So I want to like talk about that coming from the demand generation. Where does that slip into this equation?
Yeah, so you're very, very keen, very good at what you do, SA. I think for me, I wanted to send a message twofold
Mm.
that that we're branding. So it's bigger than just the production, it's bigger than just the tactics.
Mhm.
And we're leveraging podcasting to do that. And I wanted to personalize it by putting my in there. So it's not like we're helping you create an audio file or video file or show notes. No, we're podcasting your brand, right? So understanding that the podcast is a brand, so that's a foundationally a mindset. It's like, okay, it's more than just content. It's more than just me telling a story. It's the all encompassing brand. Like, how do you take that, so and really build upon that? And so that's why we named it that way. So we're hinting at those mindsets and those things that we bring to the table as an organization,
Mhm.
as to how we do what we do.
Mhm. So I mean, with that, I just want to talk about like some of your services. I mean, obviously, we're talking about video and audio, podcasting, starting, recording, launching. You're talking about content development, content growth, content production, right? You're also talking about the academy, right? So that's the learn part that you described earlier. You're talking about studio rentals, but there's just another like title that's in that equation, and I want you to kind of explain it for the listener because they may not have heard this before: authority marketing. And I want you to kind of break that down. Like, how does that fit with the generate demand and the podcasting your brand? And then last but not least, the authority of and marketing.
Yeah, so sort of how we talked about earlier, we're in the attention business,
Mhm.
right? So, but in order to get attention, you have to know where people show up. You have to know what they need and how you can serve. But after you get that attention, now you have to start to build trust.
Mhm.
And how do you build trust? You give value. You show that you care. You show that you've been listening, that you've been paying attention. And so now you're giving value. And giving value helps you build influence, because people don't know what you care, what you know, until they know that you care, right?
Mhm.
So now that people know that you care, you have influence. And then and only then, once you've built you got the attention, you've given the value, so you have the influence, and now you have trust. Now you can begin to be an authority. Now you can recommend this microphone over that microphone, or you can say, well, this platform is better than this platform because of these reasons, because you've done the work before at listening and understanding what their needs are. And so authority marketing is about going through that process and, again, building that brand on top of that process, so that now the end goal is the transformation and not the vehicle or the delivery of specific tools and assets, right? So we're always thinking about transformation. And the only way you get to transformation is to go through that process of attention, building trust, creating influence, and then finally that authority.
So let's add time travel into this equation, right? Now, obviously, you're hell of intellectual. You know your stuff cold. You've been building this business for a period of time, but there's always some kind of hurdle throughout any business development that, maybe you want to kind of go back and talk to a younger version of yourself and give yourself some words of insight to help you become who you are a lot faster. So the question is, when would you go back to, and what would you say?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would go back to when I first started to create the brand of from my podcast. So circa, and again, mind you, when I started, I didn't have a strategy. I didn't know who my audience was. In fact, I didn't even care if anybody listened to the show. Honestly, I'm just being transparent. My number one and only mission was to get in front of business people and talk to them and learn. That's it. That's all I cared about. I wouldn't necessarily tell myself not to do it that way, because I learned so much. But I would go back to the moment when I started to create a business from the podcast. And I would tell myself, and forgive me, I don't remember the name of the gentleman who created this concept. But I would tell myself, focus on the 5 1s: one target market, one product or service, one traffic source, for 1 year, and what was the other one? And one conversion method.
Sounds like traffic secrets.
Yeah, I don't know exactly if he was the originator or not, but that's what I would tell myself, the 5 1s, and then I would just let myself go, because I think had I been more focused on that, we would be further, and then we could have expanded and grown the business from there. Instead of we almost went the reverse. We did a lot of things, and then we settled down on the one thing at some point. I think that would save me a lot of time and a lot of money.
So, you talk about the one thing. What would be the one thing that if you could start over, you would start with versus starting as wide as you did?
Man, you're good. That's a great question. So the thing that I've learned, especially being in the service business, right, is the more customers you have, the more revenue you have. But the more revenue you have, the more expenses you have. And depending on how good you are with making sure that you're managing everything in the middle, there's still going to be some ratio of that, right?
Yeah.
The thing I would do different is I would do primarily digital products, and so that I could make more revenue, but keep my expenses relatively flat.
I totally agree. We live in a digital age, so that makes perfect sense. But the caveat, though, I think you and I, when that person made the comment about us being on the same accord, like you and I, we wear the brand, right? Like I'm at the point now to where my underwear needs to have my logo on it, like my shoes, everything. So that's the only thing outside like that digital world that kind of, you're talking about merchandising. So I want you to kind of talk about like, how has that been fruitful for your business as far as like, I would say like you're wearing your brand and somebody may ask you a general question. And then by default, that kind of leads into pitching the podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I drop my son off at the Y every morning. And they started to ask him questions about the business because this is basically my uniform. I don't have to think about what I'm going to wear from Monday through Friday. It's either white, blue, black, or red. That's the only choice, the only decisions that I have to make. And so to your point, I think part of being an entrepreneur, especially when you're the founder, is really embodying and living the brand. Like Podcast Town isn't something that I do. Podcast Town is what I am. It's who I am. It is woven into the fabric of my purpose and mission, right? And I think when people see that, because they can sense that, it's a differentiator, right?
Mm,
It's like, okay, he's not just trying to sell me stuff. He's really here to serve and to help me get to where I want to go.
mm.
And so you're correct. If you find a vendor who can print the logo on underwear, send them my way, because the only thing I don't have is I don't have customs branded socks, underwear, and shoes. So if you got somebody, let me know, because I'm all about being the brand and living the brand.
Well, I definitely got shoes, so I could definitely point you in the right direction with that. So it's I look at it as a standpoint of like, why would you pay capital for something that is jacked up in pricing versus you can buy your own product with your own brand at wholesale costs for the same quality. The only thing difference is that your brand is being built and those brands are established.
Mhm.
Yep.
Totally
So
agree.
So I want to talk about like your book for a minute. Now, obviously, before we get into your book, I want you to kind of think about books that you read before you had an opportunity to write your own book, books that you can kind of like articulate and say, okay, if you're starting off in this business, if you're starting as an entrepreneur, if you're starting a podcast, you need to read this book. Which book would that be for you?
The number one book would be the E-Myth Revisited.
Mm,
It really helps you to understand where you fit in the equation, because you need all three. You need the operator, the entrepreneur, and the manager. But very few people are all three.
mm,
Very few people are two of those people. Understanding, and we talked about self-mastery, right? Understanding which one of those people you are is a cheat code, because now if you're the technician, okay, I'm the technician, I started the business, but I need an entrepreneur and a manager. Or if you're the entrepreneur, but you're not the technician, okay, at some point I need to hire a technician so that we can grow this business where to be as big as it can. So I think that book did that for me. It kind of shaped, all right, you really ought to know which one you are. And maybe you shade over all three. Some people do. But really knowing that and understanding what your strengths and deficits are is a cheat code, because some people spend 10 years as a technician where they could have been 10x or 100x if they recognized that they were the technician and brought in an entrepreneur. So that book for sure, got it. It's a must read.
mm. So, spitting from that book, are any other books that you are reading right now that kind of help you to continue to grow?
There's no books that I'm reading right now outside of just kind of perusing through different ones. I'm reading a lot of sales books. I'm kind of reading bits and pieces of a lot of different ones, just to kind of beef up my sales skills. But there are none in particular that I'm just really digging into. I'm more focusing on listen to a lot of podcasts on sales and marketing, just to kind of stay sharp and learn that way. But really putting an emphasis on sales and growing my skill set there.
Mm. So last but not least, that leads us to the flame starter, right? The art of self-mastery. And we've said these keywords kind of building up to this moment. Again, I think you kind of define why that book is titled like that, but ideally, who is the ideal person that should have your book in their hands today?
Yeah, I wrote it for entrepreneurs. I talk a little bit about it in the book, how I am a flame starter, right? Go getter, high achiever. I'm going to win. Like if you're on the basketball team with me, we're going to win. Like we don't lose. Like losing is not an option, right? But the downside to that is we go hard, and
Mm,
we go hard even when we're hurt, even when we're damaged, even when we're emotionally not ready to go, we still go.
mm.
And the downside to that is sometimes you crash. And so I wrote this book to kind of help navigate through that, understanding, man, this week something's off, right? there's some adjustments that I need to make. I've been spending a lot of time away from the family this week. What, what is
Mm,
this feeling that I'm getting? What is that? Not living by the emotion, but understanding the emotion, recognizing the emotion, and then dealing with the emotion, right? Whereas a lot of entrepreneurs, we ignore it
mm,
until it's too late, and now we're depressed, or we have anxiety, or
yeah.
and now we're contemplating suicide because we ignored all the signals, we ignored all the red flags, and because we don't want to be emotional, right? And
Mm,
so part of it is really helping entrepreneurs understand, no, you have emotions for a reason. They're there for a reason. Learn how to leverage them, use them to guide the decisions you make, not to be emotional, but to recognize them and put them on the table and understand which ones are appropriate and
mm,
which ones are not. And also to really understand that you made the bed. If you do not like the bed, change the decisions that you have made, that you are making, to
mm,
make a different bed.
mm,
But ultimately, your life, your business is a sum total of the decisions that you made.
mm.
Accountability, leadership, how to serve. And that's why I wrote the book, right? We call them LZisms. It's a combination of these LZisms or concepts to kind of shape that, so that you can achieve your maximum transformation.
I think in that last statement, you brought up a couple different things. You brought up about, entrepreneurs overworking themselves, burning out. You also brought up not, realizing that you didn't spend that much time with the family and trying to figure out the adjustments going into depression. All these different things comes with being an entrepreneur. So with you, I want to know, like, how are you currently then juggling and managing like your pod life with your actual family life?
Yeah, I'm very intentional. I guess is the best way I can describe it. There are going to be some days where you're at work longer than you're at home,
Mhm.
and that's okay. A lot of people say this whole balance and harmony, and there is no balance, and all this stuff. There
Mm,
is balance. There's just different weight to the different time, right? So if you imagine a seesaw,
mhm,
uh, on this side, the time at home with my son is focused, dedicated, phone is off, not looking at it for 2 hours. That weighs 50 pounds.
mm,
Whereas this time that I spent at work, maybe that's eight hours, but that's also 50 pounds. And so now it balances itself out because it weighs different. So in my mind, that's sort of how I approach it. It's like, no, it's not going to be a one for one, right? But when the wife and I go to date night for a couple of hours to catch a movie, certainly that weighs more than me being on a podcast talking to you, right? so
yeah.
so in my mind, that's how I sort of process it. It's like, no, it's not going to be one for one. So for every hour that I spend on a podcast, I have to spend an hour with my family. No, right? It's more like, okay, this time is just making sure that it's focused, dedicated, intentional, right? That I'm not still checking my phone and not paying attention to, the shots that he's taking at his basketball
Mm,
game, but really understanding that both are important, but one is more important than the other.
mm, mm. I mean, I think it's definitely phenomenal. And considering that I'm a Sagittarius and I know that you're a Sagittarius, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't your son a Sagittarius as well? So, like having two Sagittariuses in one house, I think like that's a juggling act in itself. And like your daughter, she's 16, right? Somewhere around there.
Yep.
So like you have someone that's getting ready to kind of go into her later stages in high school. That's a mouthful situation to deal with and be an entrepreneur and a business owner and a podcaster all in one. So, are you instilling anything in the kids to help them understand what you're doing is for them and for them to utilize you as the keystone to learn from?
I do my best, but the kids these days, man, you try to tell them stuff, and they tease me that I'm always making a life lesson out of everything. But I do my best to involve them in the business and what we're doing. When we have open houses, for example, my son was the greeter, And his personality is I thought I loved the stage. Like I love the stage.
Mm.
Give me a microphone, a stage, and lights, and get out of my way. I know what to do with it. But he loves the stage, and he killed it. He was handing out the leaflets and giving the guests cookies and like taking them through the business and what we're doing. Super intelligent. Knows he's 8, but he knows some business concepts that some adults don't get. And so I try my best to give them access because I didn't see an entrepreneur when I was growing up. I didn't even know that that was a possibility. So simply by being exposed to it, my hope is that they will grab hold to some of it. My daughter's the same way. You know, she's very creative. She can design rooms and furniture and placements, and she's a dancer, and so she's very creative on that side. And so I'm doing my best to expose her to the business and the concepts and the larger concepts of business and marketing and sales and funnels and what that looks like. And so it's funny because I don't know that they'll want to take over the business,
Mm.
but I always tease them. I said, no matter what you do, don't sell the backpack. The backpack being the business.
Mm.
I said, if you don't want to run it for whatever reason, you can hire somebody to run the business. You can hire a CEO or somebody to manage it. But I'm really drilling in this concept of
Mm.
don't sell the backpack. You can own it, you and your brother, but don't sell the backpack.
Mm. I think it's crazy, man. I feel for your wife, Victoria, that the fact that like she's going to be in a household with essentially 3 entrepreneurs is what it sounds like, and she's going to be surrounded by it, and eventually everything is going to be entrepreneurism in that house sooner than later. Which is it's definitely cool. I mean, I think to your point, I think it was a video that you were walking through, and it was one of your podcast retreats, which is definitely like a phenomenal business. But behind the scenes, it's building community. So I want you to talk about like how many of these retreats have you done, and how successful have they been to as far as growing your business?
Yeah, so we get kind of done a couple of different things. We're always doing different forms of community because I think that that's the foundation and the bedrock of who
Mm.
we are. But the summit, the virtual summit, that we did a few years ago was really cool. We had folks that came from all over just to learn and grow together. And we have a group of people who kind of grew out of that are now running their own podcast businesses. So it's a really cool process of watching somebody go from being a podcast host to being a business owner, because they're, even though it's very similar in terms of the dynamics and the functionality of it, it's really cool to see them kind of blossom and become business owners themselves.
Hmm. Hmm. So, I mean, obviously, I think everything that we've been talking about kind of leads, you said it several different times, giving value back, helping people find self-mastery, education, growth. So I want you to talk to, let's say there's a bobcat in your hometown, right? That's a representation of you, when the younger version of you right now that may be listening to this podcast, right? What words of wisdom would you have for that individual to help them grow and succeed to move forward in life?
I would say go hard, go together, and have no regrets.
Hmm. And I want the listener to like stop and I pause for that, because I mean it's so simple, but it's so profound at the same time. I mean it's about achieving without hesitation. I mean that's like the best way I could to re-explain what you said. And I think it's phenomenal. So I mean, with that, if that bobcat is listening, right, or let's say that bobcat grows up and maybe a few years from now they're listening, where would you want them to contact you, or where would they reach out to get more information?
Yeah, the easiest way is email. I'm always checking it, mayor@podcasttown.net. And I'm primarily on LinkedIn, so I'm having people connect with me there. So shoot me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, and yeah, you'll be entered into my ecosystem.
Very cool. So as far as like technology, I mean, I think podcasting is a technology, is technology in the space, but you can start off really cheap or you can go really expensive and not know what the hell to do with all the equipment. I want you to kind of talk about like what tools that you use, whether it's software or hardware, on a day to day that you would not be able to do what you're doing without having access to.
Ooh, now that is a loaded question. Okay, so I love Riverside.fm.
Hmm.
That's where I record all of my shows. It does video and audio. I love the pod mics. I also use the Shure SM7B. Um, really, that's it. The Rodecaster Pro board. Uh,
Hmm.
it's the best board ever created for podcasters on the face of this planet ever.
I concur.
Fight me about it. Um, some of the software tools I love. There's a tool called Cast Magic. It's an AI enabled tool. Jasper's another good one. Um, Captivate.fm is where we host the podcast.
Hmm.
Love Zoho One.
Hmm.
I run probably 85% of my business on Zoho. So everything from my email to my campaigns, my email marketing campaigns, forms, automations, all that good stuff. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Those would be the main ones. Yeah, those would be the main ones. I mean, I could go on and on forever about
Yeah.
all the different tools, but those are the foundational tools.
So, I mean, obviously, you're already a founder. You already created, a community. Have you ever thought about creating essentially a software platform in the space to help do what you're doing at scale?
I have, I have, and you're letting the cat out of the bag. We're working on something that I think will help move the needle forward. So keep your eyes and ears open.
Okay. So that's kind of like a sneak preview. You heard it here first, kind of a little quick tidbit from the boss mayor himself. So I definitely appreciate that. So I got a bonus. Well, I got two bonus questions for you, right? First and foremost would be, out of all your achievements, and again, like you said, you're an overachiever. So you're, as soon as you make an achievement, you're gonna make another one. That's just like that's the code of a Sagittarius. Like, we're never gonna stop. But if you had to select your greatest one outside of your family, which one would it be and why?
I would have to say the book,
Mm,
uh, because again, I grew up, even though I ended up, being in engineering and technology, I didn't think I was smart enough to do that. I'm just the guy. Like I was pretty smart in school, but I wasn't like an A+ student. You know
mm,
what I'm saying? So for me to have a concept and to write a book that I believe is really impactful and really is going to save a lot of people from being being burned out and being mentally exhausted, depressed, and experiencing
mm,
anxiety. I think that's a fantastic thing, and I'm humbled by the impact that I believe that that book can
mm.
have in the world. So I would say the book is right up there with, I never thought author would be a part of we said who is Elzie, entrepreneur, yeah, husband, father, sure, author, not so much. That didn't really see that one coming.
Well, I mean, congrats on the book. And I always say, like, once you write one book and you kind of figure it out, you're a big systems guy. I'm sure it's not going to be your last book, right?
Probably not.
Yep. Yep. So another bonus question, right? If you could spend 24 hours with anyone, that person could be someone that's dead or alive. You get to spend 24 hours with them uninterrupted. Who would it be and why?
It would probably be Magic Johnson, because I'm fascinated by how he was able to take his
Mhm.
passion. And when we talk about the five ones,
Yeah.
like he exemplified it, right? He did the one thing. He got really, really great at facilitating and connecting other people to their shot, right? And he parlayed that, learned how to build relationships, learned how to add value, learned how to do all those things through his one thing. And then when that one thing was done, he
Mhm.
branched out and built a very, very successful business and multiple businesses
Mhm.
based on that one thing, right? I don't know that I would ask him anything. I would just want to see him move, how he treats his people,
Mm.
how he identifies opportunities, right? Going back to the live, listen, right? How he serves, how he finds opportunities and fills those gaps. I would just want to watch him do his thing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think Magic, I always call it the Magic Empire because to your point, like he's dibbled and dabbled in multiple different things that all sprouted from who he was as a basketball player. So it's definitely, and I always say, like, you want to compare Magic to Jordan. I mean, Jordan kind of had the leg up because he had that Nike deal, but Magic kind of had to earn his way a little bit more, do a little bit more to kind of become who he is today. So I think it's a phenomenal answer. So going into closing, I mean, I always like to give whoever I'm interviewing an opportunity to become the host of the Boston Cage podcast. You're a fellow podcaster, so this should be completely natural. The show is now yours. I'm your guest. Do you have any questions for me?
Oh yeah, for sure. So SA, tell me a little bit about as you are continuing to grow your business, you're continuing to expand and you're an entrepreneur like me.
Mhm.
So there are many things that you want to do. What's your process on how you're focusing, what you focus on, and how are you streamlining that?
It's about the data, man. I really like. It's kind of like to your point, being an overachiever. Like you'll hear about things, and it's not necessarily the big flashing lights that are attracting you. It's more so like, how can I fit that into my ecosystem? Does it fit into my ecosystem? Is it going to give more value to my ecosystem? And is it going to actually pay me out in the long run? So ideally, just looking at the stats behind the scenes, is there enough of an audience? Is there enough people in that demographic? Are these people, that they have that I could deliver enough value to them? Like those are the questions that I ask before I dive into another space. And sometimes I build it up with the intent for not this generation, but for another generation. So I'm kind of giving them like the pre-run, the early legwork to say, okay, well, these things are here, they're established, they're evergreen. And as you know, society, things kind of reoccur, kind of like platform shoes or go-go boots or bell bottoms, they cycle over and over again. So like I may build something and some people be like, why are you doing that? And so instead of me trying to explain it to them, I just kind of just sit back and just watch because again, things in life repeat themselves.
Mhm. How many questions do I get?
It's up to you, man.
So how do you work that through the focus lens, right? Because
Mhm.
naturally you can't do everything at the level that you and I like to do things.
Mhm.
So and our secondary question is, how do you manage the need for ownership, or do you have a need for ownership?
Well, I mean, I think need for ownership kind of goes into like if you're protecting it, right? I mean, you can't own anything that you can't protect because it could all easily be taken away. So for me, primarily is looking at, I've established a trademark for Boston Cage, and that's why I brand everything seamlessly underneath that title of Boston Cage because I know I have that extra level of that trademark to protect it, in addition to having a business and other things along those lines. So to answer that first part of that question is obviously earlier this year I decided to create 32 notebooks. Now, creating the 32 notebooks is not as difficult as it may seem because of the quantity. But then I was like, how do I do a long-term marketing play for these notebooks? Because again, these notebooks are evergreen. And that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I have a merch store. Why don't I leverage these notebooks and do something a little bit different and just let it play out? So I created 32 notebooks and then I created 32 sneakers to match the notebooks. I created 32 book bags to match that. And again, the design of it is all the same. I didn't have to redesign anything. I just had to re-implement the design on another product. So if you look at it from a standpoint, somebody 5 years from now may purchase a book bag or purchase a pair of sneakers, and they're gonna be asking them that question, what does that 32 mean? And then that 32 then goes back to those original 32 notebooks. So it's a seamless marketing strategy, but it's a long-term marketing strategy.
Where'd that come from? So, I mean, did you grow up in marketing or how'd you get that marketing sense? Because that's not normal. I don't know if you know that or not.
I mean, I hear voices, but I always say that, coming from a graffiti standpoint, when I look back, when I first got introduced to graffiti was a friend of mine and his tag name was Acre. And it was a really cool concept that the more you get up, the more you put your tag or the more you do your pieces is the more credible you are in the space. So if you look at the way I create content like I'm a graffiti bomber. I'll bomb and tag everything day in, day out on all platforms, all at the same time. Now, obviously, it can't be ugly graffiti, right? It can't be cheap graffiti. It has to be value. It has to be eye-catching. It has to be, you know, and it kind of have to have some value to it. So I'm creating all this content at scale, but I'm making sure I'm putting it on all these platforms. So from the outside, it may look like content, but from a graffiti standpoint, I'm catching tags. I'm bombing the internet. And then the more I bomb, the more relative you're going to get over a period of time.
I love it. I love it. So what's next for you?
Next for me kind of goes parallel to what you were saying. I mean, like building this infrastructure, I think the only thing that's next for any founder would be to figure out a SaaS-based software program to kind of do something that what we're doing at scale, or at least have buy-ins to where, you know, you have subscribers that are subscribing now, but how do you hold on to those subscribers and give them more value and create a platform that has longevity that can grow and scale with the support of all the content and all the merchandise and all the podcasts and all the articles and all the books can kind of just feed into.
All right, last question. What are you doing now to prepare to enter that world? Because that's a different world. I'm going to tell you, I've been in it sort of for a little bit. It ain't the same than building a business with no boots and no straps.
So indirectly for me, I think for podcasters, it is the easiest thing for us to select and switch, because the only thing we have to do is now target those resources and interview the living hell out of them. So if you haven't really noticed, like all my lives, literally maybe 5 out of 7 of them are founders of SaaS-based platforms, which falls into the Boss Uncaged brand. But ideally, I'm having an opportunity to talk to people one-on-one, hear their stories, hear their hurdles, add them to my Rolodex, communicate with them, follow up. So when the time comes, I could easily reach out to episode 153, episode 299, and episode 15 and be like, hey guys, I have this product on the market. Would you mind testing it out? What's your thoughts? And have an insight and an edge that the average person coming into that field would never have.
That is, my friend, a drop the mic moment. If people get nothing else out of this conversation, just that alone is worth its weight in gold. So,
well, I think everything that you dropped was definitely insightful. I think I was being facetious by saying it, but it was like a lucky leprechaun just raining golden nuggets this entire episode. and to, you know, to call out Donnie, I think Donnie, yes, Elzie and I are kindred spirits. There's no question about it. Like we share the similarities collectively across the board. So I definitely thanks Donnie, and I definitely appreciate you, Elzie, aka better known as the Boss Mayor. Thanks for coming on the show today.
I appreciate it, man. This was a good time.
Good time, man. Good time. With that, man, S.A. Graham.